Coming up, we present the story of a song that is truly a musical miracle. First of all, the masterful riff, it instantly came out of nowhere at a soundcheck. Then the iconic lyric came to the singer when he was in the middle of a movie at a theater. The singer wrote the lyrics in a flash, but on recording day, he left his lyrics in a cab, and they were never recovered. So he had to start all over again. He just couldn't remember them. The band was pissed. The song was a hit in the 70s, and then a band touted as one of rock's greatest. Fell flat on their face for many years. They couldn't buy a hit. After years of nothing, they remade this song to forge one of the biggest comebacks ever. The story is coming up next. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you've ever signed up for the 12 albums for a penny ripoff back in the day, you're going to dig this channel. I did. I actually signed up for it under like 8 or 9 different pseudonyms to build my collection. But make sure to subscribe below and take a second to look at our Patreon. That helps us to keep this a daily channel, and we give you exclusive content. Now, if there was ever a band that lived up to the proverbial lifestyle of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, it was Aerosmith. In fact, they were the band that pretty much wrote the playbook. Over a 10-year run from 1970 to 1980, Aerosmith pushed boundaries that raised into the highest of highs, and it crashed into the lowest of the lows. But Aerosmith avoided becoming a cautionary tale when they were handed a miraculous second chance that rescued their legacy and has sparked their return to the top of rock and roll royalty. Now, the incredible comeback of Aerosmith was ignited by the game-changing renaissance of one of their most famous songs, Walk This Way. Walk This Way went through several phases before becoming the catalyst for Aerosmith's fantastic resurgence. The conception of the track actually began in 1974 when the group traveled to Honolulu to be the opening act for the Guess Who. Now, the 5 members of Aerosmith had a great passion for funk and soul, playing a lot of James Brown and Sly Stone mixed with Motown tunes at some of their early paying gigs. Inside seedy R&B clubs in Boston's adult entertainment district called the Combat Zone. Fellow guitar virtuoso Jeff Beck turned Joe Perry into the New Orleans riffy funk band The Meters. And Joe had fun playing along to their music, especially, the tracks Sissy Strut and People Say. During Aerosmith's 60-minute sound check before their set with a Guess Who in Honolulu, Perry began fooling around with guitar licks that were inspired by the music of The Meters. As he played, he began to formulate a tasty riff that he wanted to expand on, so he asked Aerosmith drummer Joey Kramer to lay down something flat with a groove on his drum set. Now, while playing along to Kramer's groove, Perry just let his hands do their thing. And Joe Perry, he has incredible fine motor skills. A big reason he's such an amazing and sensational player. But during that sound check, he created his famous riff for Walk This Way without any mental manipulation. In Perry's words, the riff just came off his hands, as it was the product of divine intervention. Perry continued to follow his hands, and he constructed a bridge, followed by a solo section. By the time the sound check was finished, though, Joe Perry had invented the basic musical arrangement for the song that would become Walk This Way. When Steven Tyler heard Perry's riff, he sat behind Kramer's drum kit and he began to play along, spitting out words to feel how the lyrics should flow to the music track. Tyler, who was a former drummer, would often use his vocal cadence as a percussion instrument. Playing a drum while conjuring up the right words, it helped him to find the style that fit the groove of that song. Fast forward to 1975 now, when Aerosmith set up shop at the record plant in New York City to start recording songs for the next LP, which would be Toys in the Attic. Now, they were short on material, so Joe Perry busted out that divinely inspired riff that he developed in Hawaii so that Tyler could put some lyrics together. Now, while Tyler was working on lyrics for Perry's riff, the other 4 band members took a break and they went to a nearby cinema to take in a movie. And the film that they went to see was Mel Brooks' classic comedy, Young Frankenstein. It's just a movie that is full of memorable lines, and slapstick. I love that movie. Now, there was one particular scene that made the boys hysterically laugh out loud. In the scene, Igor, played by the bug-eyed Marty Feldman, he answers a knock on the door and ushers in Dr. Frankenstein, who's played by Gene Wilder, by saying, "Walk this way."
Walk this way. This way.
Dr. Frankenstein then proceeds to mimic the way Igor walks by imitating his limp and hunched back. Steven's bandmates came back from seeing the movie. They're in a very jovial mood, insisting that they had to call the yet unnamed track "Walk This Way." In an interview later on, Steven told a reporter that the inspiration for the title came from watching the movement of the Three Stooges on television.
He walks like this.
That same night, though, Tyler popped a Tuinal and wrote the original lyrics for Walk This Way from his hotel room. However, the next day, on his way to the record plant to reconvene with the band to record or put down the track, he left the lyrics on the seat of the cab that he was riding in. The sheets with the original lyrics for Walk This Way, they were never recovered. Probably ended up in a New York landfill somewhere. Man, I wonder what those would be worth now. Tyler figured he must have been stoned to do something so irresponsible. Now, when he got to the studio and he realized that he'd left the lyrics in the taxi, he told the guys what had happened. They didn't believe him. His mates thought that he hadn't written any lyrics and that he was stalling, which caused a series of heated arguments. Frustrated and angry, Tyler grabbed a tape recorder with the instrumental track for Walk This Way along with a pair of headphones, and he went into the stairwell and he let loose one of his signature primal screams, and he wrote new lyrics on the stairway wall. Since he'd forgotten to bring his notebook paper, he was having a forgetful day that day. After a few hours, he went down the stairs to the studio to retrieve a notebook and then went back up to the top floor where he looked on the wall and he copied the lyrics off the wall. And then he returned to the studio to sing the lyrics to the band. Now, as we go into the rest of this song breakdown, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, that helps to make this possible. When you go to Zenni.com to design your own glasses like I have many times, you can see exactly how the glasses look on you before you buy. This is possible through Zenni's virtual mirror feature. You can make sure that it matches your face, you like the color. Very cool. It's called Zenni's Virtual Try-On. Go see for yourself. So after Steven Tyler showed the band, Joe Perry loved Steven's lyrics. So his words perfectly match the funky sass of Joe's riff. Great. Walk This Way it's actually about a high school dude who calls himself a loser, who has no game with the girls until he has a tryst with a very experienced cheerleader that walks him through the process of losing his virtue. As a lyricist, Steven likes to tell the story, as we all know, while ensuring that the vocal delivery has a bouncy feel for song flow. Now, Tyler reflected back to his high school days when he too had personal encounters with older, more experienced females during what he referred to as makeout parties. And then he searched for double entendres that mask the song's gratuitous subject matter. Now, when Walk This Way hit the radio waves, David Johansen, frontman of one of Aerosmith's idol groups, the New York Dolls, he told Perry it was the dirtiest song he'd ever heard on the radio. Joe Perry regarded that comment as very high praise indeed, coming from Johansen, who was very provocative in his own right. There was a bit of an artistic tug-of-war in the recording session for Walk This Way. Perry wanted to wait until Tyler sang the vocal track, and then weave the music around his vocal attack. However, Steven wanted Joe to record the music first for the very same reason. That's why Steven added a screech to his vocal, especially in that chorus, to parallel the intensity of Joe's guitar licks. It was finally decided that Steven Tyler's vocals would be recorded first, with Perry's guitar track dubbed over his vocal. Now, to get his guitar parts to produce an electric razor effect on Walk This Way, Joe Perry chose a 50 Stratocaster Tobacco Sunburst. He also used a talk box on Walk This Way to give the song even more edge. Perry's talk box is more evident on the chorus, but still not as protruding as it was on Sweet Emotion.
How are you doing? What's your name?
Joey Kramer, who set up Joe Perry's Guitar Providence with his drumming at that memorable soundcheck in Honolulu, performs that staccato hard funk percussion that navigates Walk This Way, making it one of the stirring intros of the entire rock era. Brad Whitford and Tom Hamilton also had an uncanny feel for Walk This Way, spearheading the track's intoxicating rhythm line. As the second release from Toys in the Attic, Walk This Way was a one-of-a-kind boogie-woogie R&B rock single, but it went nowhere. It traveled a similar path to Dream On. Walk This Way failed to chart on the Billboard Hot 100 in its initial run in 1975. Now, a year later, in 76, Aerosmith had breakout success with their Rocks album, and they reissued Dream On and Walk This Way, along with a new marketing push for the Toys in the Attic LP. Both songs flourished in their second campaign, shooting to number 6 and number 10 respectively. The popularity of Walk This Way as the band's second top 10 single, it vaulted Aerosmith to the stature of stadium headliner. Unfortunately, heavy drug use and the hostile relationship between the toxic twins, Perry and Tyler, it took their toll on Aerosmith, and their career hit the skids. Now, by 1982, Aerosmith fractured, and the group's box office dramatically declined from stadiums to theaters. At that point, it looked as if Aerosmith, once hailed as America's greatest rock band in the 70s, was done. Let's fast forward to 1986, though. Jam Master Jay, who was the DJ for the rap group Run-D.M.C, had been using Walk This Way to create beats for Run-D.M.C track without knowing the artist or the title of the song that he was actually using. Back then, as many know, music rights were not as protected as they are now, and DJs would usually rip the labels off the records that they were using, so another DJ wouldn't know the beats that they were using in a recording or a live performance for that matter. Famous record producer Rick Rubin, he heard Master Jay spinning the beats, and he told him that the sample came from Walk This Way by Aerosmith. Amazing. Jay had never heard the song title or the band at that point. That's unbelievable. It gave Rubin a brilliant premonition to have Run-D.M.C record a new rendition of the song that included Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. Believe it or not, Run-D.M.C was not into it. At first, they weren't. In an interview, the three founding members of Run-D.M.C said they thought Aerosmith's lyrics were hillbilly gibberish. Plus, they didn't want electric guitars on their record at all. Run-D.M.C was at the forefront of a fresh genre of music at that moment, and they did not want to blow it. They wanted rhymes, not rock lyrics that they really couldn't relate to. Rubin ultimately needed Russell Simmons, the brother of lead singer Joseph Simmons, who went by his stage name Run. He needed him to convince the guys to remake Walk This Way featuring Steven Tyler and Joe Perry. Russell grew up in the New York suburbs, and he grew up listening to the music of Aerosmith and other classic rock bands. And he knew that Rubin's idea would be a great vehicle for his brother's group to have a huge crossover with the wide audience. Run-D.M.C. eventually agreed to do the cover on the condition that they were allowed to alter Aerosmith's lyrics. Now, Steven Tyler, on the other hand, felt disrespected by Run-D.M.C's stipulation to change his words, but eventually he too relented. The cover was Run-D.M.C's interpretation of the song, so he rolled with it. When Rick Rubin's idea for Run-D.M.C. to do a new version of Walk This Way with the two leaders of Aerosmith came to fruition, it did so with historic consequences. I mean, no one could have predicted just how monumental it would be, commercially, artistically, and culturally. The track was the precedent that firmly established the subgenre of rap rock. This is the first. The reworking of Walk This Way was monumental for Run-D.M.C. and completely revitalized Aerosmith, giving them a chance to become even bigger than they were at their zenith in the 70s. Walk This Way by Run-D.M.C. featuring Steven Tyler and Joe Perry, it was an international smash. It ended up charting higher than Aerosmith's original version. It went all the way to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 at that time. It broke the top 10 in virtually every country. Run-D.M.C. was the first hip-hop act to have their videos played on MTV. The video for Walk This Way, directed by John Small, was an immediate MTV sensation. Tyler and Perry co-starred in the video with Run-D.M.C. It was their debut appearance in a made-for-MTV music video. Back in '82, when MTV was starving for content, they actually rejected Aerosmith's music video for Lightning Strikes when Perry had left the band. During the shooting for the Walk This Way video, Perry wanted to add some bass to the track, but he had only brought a guitar. So a trio of young guys Perry called Kids had been sitting with Rick Rubin watching the shoot, and one of them ran home, grabbed the bass, and returned to help Perry out. Those three kids, though, turned out to be Rubin's buddies, the Beastie Boys.
You gotta fight for your right to
Run-D.M.C. rode the prosperity of Walk This Way, landing many other triumphs, such as becoming the first rap act to appear on American Bandstand. They were the first rap band to be featured on the cover of Rolling Stone, first to be nominated for a Grammy Award. The Run-D.M.C. cover was also named Best Rap Single at the Soul Train Awards. The 3 members of Run-D.M.C. and all 5 members of Aerosmith went to the podium to accept the Soul Train Award, and that was another great moment in music history. In 2018, the Run-D.M.C.'s Raising Hell album that included Walk This Way was inducted into the National Recording Registry by the Library of Congress as being culturally, historically, and artistically significant. Raising Hell heralded the golden age of hip-hop as the first hip-hop record to achieve multi-platinum certification, eventually selling close to 4 million units. Now, while Run-D.M.C.'s version of Walk This Way was blowing up everywhere, Steven Tyler and Joe Perry were in rehab. They were sticking to a vow, to get clean and sober so that the band could take full advantage of the momentum that was created by the Run-D.M.C. cover of Walk This Way. So in 1987, as many know, Aerosmith released Permanent Vacation, and it was a monster album. It sold nearly 6 million copies. And after the enormous popularity of Walk This Way, the video, Aerosmith was set up for instant power rotation on MTV when they released their first video from Permanent Vacation for Dude Looks Like a Lady. And the follow-up album after that, Pump, that dropped in '89, was even bigger. It sold 7 million units. And Aerosmith seemed to put out hit after hit through the 90s, including their lone #1 single, if you can believe it, I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. Besides Run-D.M.C.'s landmark remake, Walk This Way has been covered by the UK all-girls group Sugababes and Girls Aloud, Macy Gray, Hasty Dixie, and the String Cheese Incident. I loved this song as a kid. I knew the original before Aerosmith and Run DMC redid it. It's my dad, he had the 8-track, he had the record, Toys in the Attic, played it all the time. I always thought the Steven and Joe's vocal guitar duo where Steven says, just give me a kiss like this, and then Joe plays that funky riff. It's just one of the most memorable duo parts in rock history.
Just give me a kiss.
You know, fate is a very strange and mysterious power that is beyond human control. Fate can truly determine success or failure, ascension or decline, life or death. Why did Aerosmith receive that miraculous deliverance with a renaissance of Walk This Way and then get the opportunity to atone for the debauchery and relatively horrible decision-making of their past, when other legendary artists that flirted with disaster like Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, or Janis Joplin, for example, they didn't get the luck of the draw? I suppose it's one of the reasons we're so fascinated by the rock and roll mystique. It's a force that is beyond our comprehension, but when it hits us, it's an incredible rush of adrenaline to our mind and spirit that moves us like nothing else. Walk This Way is truly a musical miracle. A big fat stiff on its first run, a breakthrough number 7 hit on its second run, and a worldwide phenomenon that shaped the future of music on its third run. You know, with rock and rap clashing in what you could probably now say might have been a musical crossroads. Make sure to leave us a comment on this classic song. What are your memories of this hit? Some of you probably remember both times that it was a hit, originally for Aerosmith and then the Run-D.M.C. What are your thoughts on 1986 when genres were changing with rock and rap coming together? Let us know below. We'd love to hear from you. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe below. Check out our Patreon and our merch, our Vintage Years collection. Help us keep the music alive. Very important. It's what we do. It's why we do what we do. Excuse me. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.